Go ahead and close this here. Locked in there. Okay, well, Julian, thank you for doing this here.
Sure.
So the idea is, initially, if you would just tell us a little bit about yourself in terms of like a time capsule. It doesn't have to be contemporary. What you're, just
okay.
Who you are.
Yes.
What you have to say about yourself, and then we'll go to the next step.
Okay. All right. Just say when.
Sure. Well, I'm ready now.
Okay. Good. Good. Well, I am Julian Priester. I have been performing as a jazz artist. I prefer the term artist as opposed to jazz musician. I'll explain why later. I've been performing as a jazz artist since the mid-1950s, I would say 1953, when I graduated from DuSable High School in Chicago, Illinois, under the tutelage of Captain Walter Henry Diet, famed instructor mentor. He's a famed mentor. There are people who he has mentored have gone on to become icons in their specific discipline. I'm talking about singers and saxophone players, trombone players, trumpet players, names such as Nat King Cole, Gene Ammons, Dorothy Donegan, and on and on. Folks like Johnny Griffin, Clifford Jordan, and many, many more, including myself. That was just before I was able to leave Chicago a couple of years later. But in the meantime, between 1953 and 1956, I had the occasion to perform I'll be on the same stage, let me put it like that, performing with blues icons, Muddy Waters, Bo Diddley, and I think my sort of high point in during that particular period was performances that I enjoyed with Sun Ra. Sun Ra has put together a medium-sized group that included John Gilmore, Pat Patrick, Charles Davis, my high school buddy and dear friend, and the list goes on and on. So between 1953, 54, and 56, Sun Ra was one of the main activities, musically that is, that I enjoyed. And I should give you some idea of the circumstances that brought me to that. As a younger person, when I would say 9 years old and on, I grew up in a family. There's 5 brothers and a sister. I was the youngest of that crew, and we had a piano in our home. And my sister, one of my brothers, and my mother played the piano. I was fascinated with the instrument. I would climb onto the piano seat and mimic my brother, who was actually a jazz fan. He and his friends would gather at our home to listen to jazz records, also to jam. They would become so excited at listening to these records, and they would put the needle back and keep playing one passage over and over and exclaim how fantastic this passage was musically and how inspiring it was to them. And so I was captivated by the excitement that they demonstrated. And so I would, when they take a break, I would go to the piano and mimic what I had seen and heard them do while they were sort of jamming. And I showed a marked interest in music, maybe not in music itself at that stage, but in the excitement that was generated then. And also, I was fascinated with the names of the artists that they were listening to. Names like Bud, names like Bird, names like Perez, Lady Day. For me, those names were out of some kind of fantasy world. Certainly, none of the people who I knew personally had names like, Monk, Diz, Dizzy. Those were fascinating and very interesting. Names that just sort of act like maggots, not maggots, I'm sorry, magnets that sort of just attracted me to that whole phenomena. And since I had shown an interest in playing the piano, this was a little bit later, a few years later, as a matter of fact, when I was about 11, 12 years old. My mother had passed away, and my father had remarried, and to a lady who also had a piano, and so they consented to give me some formal piano lessons, which they did. And by that time, I had developed an ear because of my habit of going to the piano and mimicking what my brother had heard and seeing him play. So I could go into the piano and find those sounds on the piano, and in my non-experienced way, I was able to make out a few little licks on the piano, and the boogie woogie piano style was very popular back in the mid-40s when this took place. So anyway, I'm just sort of giving you a prelude to my decision to devote my life to music. When I had these piano lessons, I learned how to read music, and so by the time I arrived in high school, as a person who could read a little bit of music and it was very attractive to join the high school orchestra. Actually, I really wanted to join the high school jazz band, but in order to do that, I had to perform in the orchestra, and that's when my education really was initiated. In order to play in the orchestra, we had to play. In order to play in the jazz band at school, we had to play in the orchestra, and the orchestra had a secondary activity that they also played for the football games, during football games, and in Chicago, that was one of the celebration that they did not just DuSable High School, but many of the high schools in the Chicago area participated in. It was actually a parade, and we would don ROTC uniforms and march in this parade. And that's when I came across a hurdle. meaning that I found myself in a position. Oh, okay. That's my phone. I'm just going to ignore it.
Okay.
I'll just send it to the voicemail. Yeah. Okay. Don't pay any attention to
we'll
that
just
sound.
edit this part out here.
Yeah. Okay. As a member of the orchestra and having to play in this parade and being a pianist, I was given an instrument called a glockenspiel. The glockenspiel is an instrument you wear in a harness around your shoulders, and it sort of looks like it has a keyboard, a metal keyboard, in the fashion of the piano keyboard, and so you perform, you hit these keys with mallets, and the mallets were sort of, I think they were wooden, had wooden balls on the end that struck the keys, and the sound that produced was a very metallic sound. That sound was harsh on my ears, and I did not enjoy playing that instrument. So I asked my instructor, Captain Diet, if I could to switch to play a horn. I wanted to play a horn, anything to get away from that glockenspiel. And when he asked me what kind of horn I wanted to play, I had no idea, but I'd heard a rumor that one of my older brothers had played the trumpet at some point in his career. So I mentioned to Captain Diet that I would like to play the trumpet. And coincidentally, there was no trumpeter available in the orchestra, and so what he did, he gave me an instrument that had the same fingering system as the trumpet, and that was the baritone horn. Baritone horn you may be familiar with if you've seen these Salvation Army bands. On the Salvation Army bands, the baritone horn was a sort of a main instrument there, in addition to the bugle, not bugle, but the cornet and the trumpet and flutes and instruments like that. So I took this baritone horn, and since I could already read music, it didn't take me a long time to become proficient on the baritone horn. But another hurdle presented itself, and that was there's no precedent at this time for the baritone horn playing in a jazz context. So as it turned out, and this is another coincidence, that the mouthpiece that I was using to play on this baritone horn turns out to be the same mouthpiece that is used on the trombone. So, without consciously choosing the trombone as my major instrument, or my main instrument, it sort of coincidentally, I was led to the trombone, and unusual, in sort of a sideways effect. So that's how I arrived at the trombone, and the trombone was an instrument that's already accepted in the jazz orchestra and combos. There were many examples of trombonists, I should say, that legitimized that particular instrument. So I arrived at the trombone, learned the trombone, and in a matter of weeks, I was good enough to play in the jazz orchestra on the trombone. So that was good. And then, once I graduated from DuSable High School and worked with Sun Ra and performed also on the same stage with Muddy Waters, Bo Diddley, and other opportunities, one of my classmates, Charles Davis, at the time he was playing the baritone saxophone, and we formed a group, and we would jam. And Chicago was a very fertile city for jazz music, and there were lots of situations we could we would be exposed to that we could be inspired by the activities in those jam sessions. And we also, Charles Davis and I, and Muhal Richard Abrams, the pianist, who was one of our peers, we formed a group and booked concerts and performed on stage together. And that was my first sort of opportunity to have to compose music for the group that we had put together. So that was the beginning of my writing activities. Then I was still a teenager, and a few years later, when I turned 21 years old, and I had been working with Sun Ra for a few years by that time, and another one of my classmates, a bassist, Richard Evans, who was working with Lionel Hampton's orchestra, called me and asked me if I would be interested in joining Lionel Hampton's orchestra. They had a trombone chair available, and so I accepted it and joined Lionel Hampton and went to Europe and also performed all over the United States with that orchestra.
What year was that?
That was in 1956. And also, Lionel Hampton was headquartered in New York City, which was a sort of the main, what can I call New York City? It was the center of the jazz activities for me and my peers. During that particular period, the West Coast was not attractive. The West Coast musicians and the West Coast jazz style was different from the Midwest and the East Coast jazz style. The East Coast jazz style was sort of described in the styles of people like Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie, Thelonious Monk. Those very same names that I was fascinated with as a child. So naturally, I wanted to